You are. Thank you.
Perfect. You should be good to go anytime.
All right. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Municipal Planning Commission meeting for August the 11th. Imagine that, already the middle of August. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And I do see one missing person from our meeting, and so I would entertain a motion to excuse Dan from our meeting. Holly, you will do so?
Yes.
Thank you. All in favor of that motion? That is carried. Minutes. Minutes from our July 21st meeting, our last meeting of MPC. Any questions, comments, concerns, or a motion to approve, please? Ellen?
Motion to approve the minutes.
All right. Any further conversation? All in favor of that motion? That is carried. Call for post-agenda items. Are there any agenda additions, deletions? A motion to approve. Adina. So moved by Adina. All in favor of that motion? That is carried. Development report. Are there any questions? Maria, did you want to, or Shanalee? Is this your report, Shanalee? Thank you. Anything you want to highlight to us?
No, but I can answer questions.
Okay. Are there any questions of Shanalee? Yes, Ellen.
The last entrance, it is installation of an RTM. What is an RTM?
Go ahead.
An RTM is a ready-to-move home, and it is new.
Okay. Any other questions? We will accept that for information then. Thank you, Shanalee. Subdivisions 7.1. Maria, is this you? Good morning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is subdivision application number 2022-0-008. The proposal is to subdivide a 7.69 acre parcel from the northeast of 1516 for residential purposes. The parcel is in Division 4, approximately 2 kilometers southwest of the hamlet of Rainier. This would be the first parcel out of the quarter section. Information has been submitted from the Alberta Energy regulators indicating that there is one abandoned well on the remnant parcel, not on the subdivision. And there are wetlands within the quarter section, but again, not on the proposed subdivision. All structures are located within the proposed property lines, and they meet the setbacks of the land use bylaw. Comments from the circulation include Alberta Transportation is okay with the proposed subdivision. Fortis does not have any easement requirements, and the standard conditions from the Eastern Irrigation District that all irrigation acres must be removed, and that the applicant must enter into a water agreement with the EID. So staff is recommending that this subdivision be approved with the conditions listed.
Okay, thank you. And I just realized we have guests in our gallery. I'm sorry about that. Welcome this morning. Let's do a quick round of introductions so that you know where we're all coming from, and we'll get to know you a little bit better as well. Neil, would you like to start us off?
Neil Johnson, Division 10.
Amanda Philpott, Division 8.
Good morning, Ellen Unra, and I represent the countryside around the village of Rosemary.
Hi, Greg Screever, Division 5, Castles and Lake No Resort.
And again, I'm Kelly Chrisman from the Div 6, which is around Bazzano on the west side of the county.
Good morning, Arno Dirksen, Division 9, the GEM area.
Morning, Matt Fensky, County Administrator.
Good morning, Holly Johnson, Division 4, Scandia, Rainier, and Bow City.
Good morning, Adina Scandrup, Division 2, the Tilly area.
Hi, I'm Lynette Kopp, Division 3, Patricia Millicent area.
Pam Elliott, Admin Assistant Planning and Development.
Sandra Stanway, Brooks Bolton.
Good. And we'll start here with, in the blue shirt, please. You are? Jamie? Welcome, and thank you for coming in this morning. We'll go back to 7.1 on our agenda. Maria has laid it out for us. Are there any questions? Yes, go ahead, Holly.
I had two questions. The first was on the subdivision. There's apparently the line runs through buildings. What's happening with the buildings? It looks like it to me anyway. And then when I looked at the big map, it appears that there's a bottom portion that actually belongs to the EID on that quarter. So is that considered something out already, or that is not really involved in it at all? On the big wall map, there was green on the bottom of that quarter.
Well, respond to the second question first, pardon me. It is an entire quarter section, so there may be EID right-of-way on the lower section. It looks like maybe there was a pipeline or maybe a drain at one time, but it's not a parcel out of that quarter. And then in regards to the buildings, I believe there's corrals there, and so that will be cleaned up when the subdivision be approved.
Any other questions? How would you like to proceed with this application? Neil?
I would move this application be approved.
Okay. As recommended. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? All in favor of Neil's motion? That is carried. 8.1, development permits. Channelie will take this.
Thank you. Development permit 2022059 is for the construction of an industrial solar facility. The Alberta Utilities Commission provided approval on May 25th of 2022. The project is located on approximately 2,200 acres of private agricultural pasture land. The construction will commence in September of 2022 and be complete by December 2023. It's expected to employ 400 employees during construction and 10 full-time employees following. Traffic during construction will be approximately 400 personal vehicles and 50 delivery trucks each day. The Alberta Environment assessed the area at high risk in 2021, but after changes have been made to the project, it is now the overall risk is moderate. However, the wildlife is still at a high risk. The site plan meets all the applicable setbacks for the land use bylaw. However, the applicants are requesting a 0 setback for the internal property lines. The Conservation and Reclamation Director for Renewable Energy has legislation that for the reclamation of the project, and they are required to submit a plan of reclamation annually to them. There was no issues or concerns from staff. There was 3 responses from adjacent landowners, which are included in your package. Eastern Irrigation District responded, and they asked for a condition which has been added as condition M on the development permit. We are recommending approval with conditions. The applicants are available to answer questions they are here virtually, and there is a couple landowners that would like to speak as well.
Okay, thank you, Channelie. Would the landowners like to come forward and speak for or against this application? Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Clausen first. Okay. And we do have your letter in our package. So I would ask you to, if you have anything new, we do have your letter, so you don't have to read your letter to us, okay?
Okay. Well, thank you for the time, just to bring some concerns forward. And what I would have preferred if we could have met with them in person, because when they put forth the Zoom call, at that time they didn't even realize that our acreage even existed. Like when we tried to explain to them we're south of the canal, right next to us is where the proposal is, and they had no idea that our acreage was even there. So it would have been so nice if they would have come out, that we could have had a meeting with them or showed them around it and our concerns and stuff like that. And so they didn't really make an effort to communicate as far as that goes. I received one call and I didn't have time to talk. I was at work, and they never bothered calling back or anything. So they didn't really communicate so we could kind of explain our side of it. So I guess as we heard, they're asking for no setbacks. We would like, if at all possible, to have it actually set back a little bit. You know, it's looking at out of our bedroom window, that we can see that pasture, like it's right there. And they think that the trees are blocking the whole thing. Like we have trees in the yard, but it's not blocking everything that they think that it is. And our living room window, it's the same thing. You know, one of our biggest concerns is we found out about this roughly about a month after we moved in, that there was a proposal there. We would have never bought the place had we known that. You know, my fear is if we ever want to go and sell this place, it's not very attractive. We looked at a place to buy Brooks here, by the overpass where that solar farm is, and we didn't buy that. It wasn't there at the time, but it was proposed to have a solar farm come there, so it didn't look attractive to us at all. So same thing over here. Now we move in, and a month later we find out that it's coming there. And we put our life savings into this place, and we started with a lot of renovations and stuff, so we put everything in there we could to make it our home. And now if we want to go and sell, I'm not sure what it's going to be worth, or if anybody's even going to want to buy it. So that's kind of one of our concerns. So they haven't been very good neighbors as far as that goes, you know, for communication and listening to what we have to say and that kind of stuff. So. And so with that construction, we would like if they didn't come into our property or have the construction go right by our house for reasons for pets and children and stuff like that. And yeah, so those are basically the things that I wanted to mention. So.
Okay, thank you. Would you be open to communication with the solar company now?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you. We can, Holly.
So what kind of setback are you looking at from your yard? Like looking at the pictures, it looks like, you know, your yard is right where the project is going to be, looking at the maps. So what kind of setback do you think is appropriate, are you requesting?
Well, having heard what they proposed, that's way less than what they mentioned that one time. Like I said, I was on the phone with them that one time, and I didn't have time. They were saying, well, we'll move it back 200 or 300 meters. So I'm not sure if that would still be an option or not, but we would like that. If we go with, I think on Highway 36, what I understand, it's 80 meters. You know, that would be a lot better than what we have right now with only being 30 meters and so on. And, you know, to look at, you know, I would like to see if we could have some trees planted like on their side of the fence, and then have them take care of it and look after it for the life of the project type of deal. So.
Okay, thank you. Maria, could you enlighten MPC on our role in this process? As stated, I understand that Alberta Utilities Company has already approved the location. So what is MPC's role at this point?
That's a really good question. So when the AUC approves a project like this, the county really is required to follow suit and support the decision that they made. They're ultimately a higher body. MPC does have the ability to impose conditions because the solar freestanding greater than 56 square meters is discretionary. MPC does have the ability to add conditions to make this project suitable for those lands. Those conditions do need to be backed by solid planning principles, because both the applicant and also adjacent landowners do have the ability to appeal any conditions that you may decide to place on this permit. I think that's all.
Thank you.
There's more
Thank you, Maria. Mr. Clausen, did you have anything else you wanted to add, or shall I move on to any other comments?
That's all I have for now. So Margaret will also be saying a few words. Yeah. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I just spoke with Margaret, and she suggested that I go first on this. My name is Ben Commodore. I live just north on the corner of 190 and 155 with my wife. We recently moved here about 3 years ago. When this project was first announced, I actually took some time to talk to Mr. Bergert with Solarcraft, and just to make you guys aware as council and kind of the relationship or lack of relationship that Solarcraft has attempted to make within the community. In one of my conversations with Mr. Bergert, he actually attempted to solicit me in an attempt to change my opinion on the project, to not oppose it. I have my ticket as a Red Seal journeyman electrician, and when I mentioned that to him in conversation surrounding the location, because initially the conversation was surrounding why put the solar farm there, because there was talk of they were going to tie it into the existing substation. So throughout my conversation, there was an attempt, and it was stated that if I owned a business, there would be opportunity for me to work, and if I worked for one of the local companies, there would be opportunity to make money there. So from the very start, as a guy who, I'm kind of shake your hand and I'll take you at your word, that wasn't very appropriate in my opinion, and I'm 30 years old, but I've been around long enough to know that something doesn't sit right when you start doing stuff like that right off the bat. I also spent a ridiculous amount of time talking with Kristen Klein, who works for Alberta Environment and Parks, who did the report. And while at the end of it, it's deemed as a high risk for the environment in that area, and I had also mentioned that to Mr. Berger during our conversations. And speaking out of tone, he made statements along the lines of smart hawks can avoid the panels and things of that nature, and it didn't sit well. And I realized that when this project was initially to us, albeit it was in development before the easement that was in place on the prairie ground, which that easement's public knowledge. If you guys are unaware, all of the land on the north side of Antelope Creek Road and then east of Jamie Buto's property, that's all that prairie, had an easement put in place by Ducks Unlimited. That easement was existing until 2017. The point of the easement was to keep the cattle off of the Kitson Reservoir basins because of the nesting habitat for ducks and geese, to keep the pressure off of them and allow them to breed. So that was where my conversation was surrounding in the sense of not only the hawks that feed up there, but also, where are we going to put these cows? Where are they going to go? So there was just a lot of stuff that was not really sitting well with me in my initial phone call conversations. And then obviously at the height of COVID, we couldn't have an in-person meeting at the original. So we had a Zoom meeting, which They claim they have the footage of that. You guys are, I think you should take a look at that footage before you make any concessions at all. It was very handpicked in the comments and the questions that were asked. And then when we stated, are we going to have another meeting in person? I'm young enough to understand how a computer works and log in, but there are plenty of neighbors in the community, especially, that have no idea how that works. And all they wanted, specifically the gentleman I was just sitting beside, all he wanted to do was sit down in a room and have a conversation with someone, because this is right in our backyard. And at no point, not even today, could they make an effort to show up in our community and have a conversation and sit here and look us in the eye and talk to us. And I don't think that for someone who's trying to move into my backyard, I moved here 3 years ago, I know all my neighbors probably within the first 6 months. I met all of them. You want to move in here and put a project like this that's going to impact all of us in some level, you should have made an effort to be here and to meet us. There's been opportunities since the peak of COVID. We could have met at the location outside and kept distance. There's no excuse as far as I'm concerned, and I would really like the council to take that into consideration in the treatment of our community members throughout this process, because it's not okay, it's not acceptable, especially when you have older people within our community that the technology isn't necessarily it's not, they just don't understand how that works. So I have kind of a couple things I'd like to go over, and I have questions for the county, and I'm not sure if this is the way that this works, but I have questions that no one has answered throughout this process, because throughout this process, I feel confident in speaking as a member of the community, that the only person that's actually listened to us was the lawyer that we hired through AUC throughout this process. No one else has bothered. So my first request, and I'm going to run on safety here. Like I say, I have my ticket as an electrician. Safety is at the forefront on this. I'm requesting that the council enforce a mandatory wind barrier surrounding the entire project. And when I say wind barrier, I don't mean saplings. I mean mature trees that are started, and we have water access to them at all times. My main reason for this is Highway 36 is a main corridor up and down. Just last year, we had a wind and hailstorm that came through. The windstorm did terrible damage to my home, as well as a bunch of my neighbors. Now you're going to have construction going on in this area. You're going to remove all the grass that exists within this area underneath these solar panels. You get a windstorm coming through there, blowing snow, whatever the case may be, and while I'm certain that they are going to get on here when I'm done and say, well, the solar panels will stop the wind. In 20 years, 25 years, when the project's life is ended and they have moved on to somewhere else, or the project is not renewed, because nobody's focused on that right now. Everyone's looking at the immediate, and I'm looking 25 years down the road as a 30-year-old who just bought a home and an acreage and is going to be here long term. So I'm requesting, surrounding the entire project, my main reasoning for this is along Highway 36 from a blowing wind, blowing snow perspective. Antelope Creek, that highway is a main route for cattle haulers and grain haulers, both from local farmers and then as well as the Hutterite colony that's over towards Bow City as well, can travel up and down that road. So I think that needs to be covered. And then for everyone to the north of the community, blowing snow, blowing dirt, etc., all along and because you're going to have issues with the breeding ducks and geese that are all in the irrigation canal. You need to have some sort of barrier, you need to have some sort of protection from them, but also for the neighbors and everybody to the north. And I'm not putting this in or coming at this from an aesthetics perspective. This is simply a safety and protection of our homes and our assets. As far as Mr. Clausen stated, I believe within their home, a minimum of 500 yards needs to be the allowance towards their home. If I live there and I got less than that, I would do everything in my power from a lawyer's perspective to fight that tooth and nail, because I don't think that's acceptable at all. So that's my first request that I have. I'd also like to know exactly, because no one has answered this question, where are the cattle going to go that were displaced? Because that was part of a grazing association within that area north of Antelope Creek. I know, I have a feeling the answer is going to be, well, they'll go in and around the Kitson Basins. And as a gentleman who now makes his living in the hunting and fishing industry, I'm very disappointed in that answer, because that's not sustainable. That's not very environmentally friendly from a thinking of our, animals that exist, specifically the waterfowl.
And you understand that that question could only be answered by the landowner, right?
So because it's part of the grazing association, I guess the question was from the get-go was, we're running out of land. We're coming off of COVID. We're seeing beef prices rise, and some of my neighbors are already driving cattle as far north as Halkirk. So it's like, I was hoping for some direction in the sense from council to assist the grazing association, and maybe I'm speaking out of turn on that, and that's not your area or what you guys deal with. But where does the land, I guess I'm facetiously asking, are we creating more land somewhere for the cows to go because we're taking cows away? And so I'm just reiterating that no one from the start has been able to answer that question, and I realize why they haven't, but I continue to ask it because it's, for me, I hope it at least leaves a thought when you're sitting at home going, yeah, where are we going to start putting cows if we keep putting these projects up? And then thirdly, I'd like the council to know, or to be able to tell us as community members, what's the plan when this is done? The life expectancy of these panels are 20 to 25 years, and these guys can talk a big game about how in 20 to 25 years, they're going to renew the project, they're going to continue to update and upgrade. We heard the same thing from all the oil wells that we still haven't had reclamated. There's still several of them that have not been reclamated. And to date, there is no public bond placed in place or required. Our lawyer also asked through the AUC process for them to do that. You're bringing up my fourth point here in a hurry with this map. I appreciate that. But I guess I'm asking the council, so what should I start saving in terms of the increase of taxes that are going to happen in 25 years when solar craft? It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, because there will be different energy sources that we will access to, just like the oil rigs. So what's the plan here when there's 800,000 piles that are driven into the ground, and now we have grassland that is no longer grassland and is not usable? Like I say, we're still waiting on the oil wells. So I want the council to, at the very least, take that into consideration in all of this when you're making your requirements for solar craft at this point, because there isn't a plan. They have a private bond or a private deal with EID that has not been shared. So I go back to my initial point of community involvement. You'd think if you wanted to move in here and you were going to do something like this, you'd do a good faith and put up a public bond of some form. And we talked about that in the AUC meeting as well.
Okay, thank you.
And I guess I also have, so I've talked about the meetings with the community. So the location, we can't change that. I pitched from the beginning, just put it all on Jamie's land, but obviously by the rat's nest that exists up there, we're asking from a health and safety perspective of the workers as well. We know that surveys are not bang on. So is the hospital prepared for the major potential life-threatening risks of driving these piles in the ground with these pressurized oil pipelines? Is our hospital ready to go in the event that something terrible happens? And that's something that I think the county needs to take into consideration, and if funding needs to be allocated there, because unfortunately these things do happen, these instances do happen, and we need to be prepared for this.
Okay, thank you.
So I also would like to know, and I think that this is important to bring up now from the county for future meetings for you guys to discuss your involvement in these projects going forward. This one had, from my understanding, and I've been with this project from the start, the county hasn't been involved in it, and I understand that it may not be your place to get involved in the sense of, talking to us as community members, approaching AUC, approaching these landowners. But as I said, I work for a company now. We're the #1 waterfowl decoy supply company in the world. And while that may not seem like a huge deal to a lot of you guys, the industry here in Brooks is hunting and fishing. And that is the main source of tourism. I'm sure some people come to see the aqueduct, but I don't believe that that's the #1 driver to the area. I believe hunting and fishing is. We have 2 videos that were filmed in the Brooks area for hunting that are over 1 million views right now. To suggest that Brooks is on the map when it comes to waterfowl hunting is pretty big. And if these projects are going to continue to happen, that's going to change migrations patterns. It's going to change the opportunity for hunters to arrive here. So I'd like to know what the county, or I'd like to see the county more involved in this from the start, because there's other factors that come into play other than the 10 jobs that are existing. The 400 construction jobs are not going to come primarily from the Brooks area. And we can look at the substation that was built on Highway 36. I worked on it, and I lived in Calgary at the time. The company that was hired was out of British Columbia. So the money will be here for the guys that are working, but when they leave, it's the same thing that happened with that project. There's 10, 15 guys working that substation. It doesn't really impact the community as a whole drastically. It does in the short term, but not the long term. So I'm hopeful that going forward with these projects, the community or the county and the elected officials are more involved in this and take a better understanding. You could have put this somewhere else and eaten up a third of the land. But because of all the pipelines, the footprint is much larger than it is required or than it should be. So in closing, I'm just asking, along with my neighbors, for the county to consider our requests. Throughout this process, there's been, as I've stated, there's been a lack of involvement, incredibly, from Solarcraft's effort, as apparent that they couldn't even attend this meeting today in person. AUC may have approved this, but the county can support the community members by giving no concessions to Solarcraft. The entire Castles community is frustrated, hurt, and overall lost. They're at a loss over this project, and the support and leadership from our elected officials would go a long way in starting the healing process. Once again, I'm asking on behalf of the community to require Solarcraft at the bare minimum to outline the entire project with mature trees for a windbreak, not only to protect the safety of transportation and vehicles moving up and down the highways, but also to protect our investments, which are our homes and our livelihoods in the land.
We heard you. Yeah,
So,
thank you.
I appreciate it, and thank you.
Anything else?
No, if you guys have any questions, I'm all ears.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Arnold?
I have a question. Thanks for your presentation. I understand you're saying that Solarcraft has not been involved with the community or has not met with the community on a face-to-face basis throughout this?
Correct. We have had a Zoom meeting, and they may or may not have had individual meetings with maybe the Clausens in particular, people that are very close, but to date, they have not even rented the Castles Hall to have a meeting with us. They have not met with us face-to-face once.
Was that raised with the AUC as well?
Yes.
And what was their response?
So I raised it, and kind of the way that, unfortunately, I was working throughout, and it was a week-long process, so I wasn't 100% sure what their end comments on it were, but again, Solarcraft continued to fall back on the old scapegoat of COVID, and last summer, the restrictions were lifted, and we all could have met outside at a safe distance. So, yeah, I think that's, if I can speak on behalf of our community in a whole, I think that's a driving factor in the frustration of, we're going to lower your property value, we're going to bring in all of this infrastructure, 400 vehicles and all that, and we haven't met with you.
I'll just stop you for a moment.
Yeah.
When you say that you're going to receive a lower property value, we don't know that. Let's keep this.
According to the lawyers that we hired and their research, we do, based on the statistics of where it is. And I mean, would you buy the Clausens home?
I'm dealing with facts.
And so I'm asking, so I'm going to add, in an anecdotal perspective, would you buy the Clausens home tomorrow if that solar farm's there?
I'm not going to get into a debate. I do have a comeback for you, and I'll do that offline with you, but
Okay.
I'll just keep it at that point. We're going to stick to the facts, and we don't know that property values will be reduced. Go ahead.
Out of the AUC hearing, the estimated impact to property values ranged from 0 to 5%. So the testimony that was provided there, that's the range of impact that they expect, from nothing to a 5% decrease.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Arnold.
I have another question. You mentioned that because of the pipelines already underground, the infrastructure underground, this footprint is larger than it would need to be.
Yes.
Does somebody have an estimate of the dynamic of that? Like, what's the?
I mean, just looking at that map, so you can see in the center where the big yellow circle is. I mean, that's all space that will be taken up because of the project. It's unusable space. You're not going to put cows in that little bit of area, and they're going to have all sorts of stuff on the surface that they can do. They can't put solar panels there, but when you look at this, you know, you look at all those yellow lines, the green lines, that's places that we can't put a solar farm or solar. So if you moved this to a different location, I realize that it's very hard to find somewhere, specifically in Alberta, but in this county as a whole, that doesn't have a pipeline underneath it. But you couldn't have picked a worse location given the gas plant that exists right there. You then have the power plant that's there as well, plus you have that main yellow lines going to the other gas plant at the end of 190. So the footprint could have been substantially smaller just simply by looking at the map alone. I don't have the exact numbers, unfortunately, for that. But, I mean, all the green and everything else, we're not putting panels there because there's either risers or pipelines, and all the yellow as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Mrs. Clausen. And then Mr. Budo, are you, okay? All right, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. So me and Frank were discussing about Solarcraft making an effort. They came out once. We were very unaware of it. They came out, brought us a card if we had any questions. So we did try to talk to them, and they're like, we're not sure. This was after the Zoom call. They're like, we did not even know you guys existed on that property. And then Frank tried to call them again. That number was unavailable anymore, so we had no way of contacting them at all. And they keep saying, I don't know if there's a picture of our property that that I sent in.
Yep, we have your letter.
Okay. And they keep saying that there's a driveway in front of our property. That's part of our property because our road is behind our house. So this is what used to be the county road, but it's not anymore. That's part of our property. And they keep saying that that's part, like, so that's the road. This is our part of our driveway. That's all part of our driveway. That's not a road. That's not public road. That's our property.
Yeah.
So, and they keep saying that we can't see nothing from our property. I took this picture just the day I sent it.
Okay.
And we can see the cows, like you can see the trees.
Yeah.
Is very visible. So that will all be solar panels right there. And I know there's very little bearing that this has, that I'm in the meeting or Ben or Frank or anybody else, because I think it's already all been decided what you guys are going to do. But I would like for you guys to consider, if you live there, put yourself in our shoes, my family's shoes. Sorry. I was going to get emotional, but anyway.
Is there anything else, Mrs. Clausen?
No, just that part that our kids are going to play there. I would prefer that it was further away. And we have pets. We can't control that they're not going to go there. And especially our boys, they play outside.
So your main concern, is it safety? Is it sightly?
Safety and then privacy. Like, we bought it because it was privacy, like all the privacy that's there.
And you feel that with solar there, you won't have the privacy any longer?
No.
Okay.
And then it will be so close, like, I think you said it was discriminating if we ask for more, if you guys make them do more than 30 meters. It's right in front of my door.
Yeah.
Right in front of my door.
Thank you.
That's all I've got.
Thank you. Much appreciated. All right. MPC. Oh, please come forward. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Mr. Schneider, for those of you who don't know me.
Yep. Mr. Schneider, go ahead.
Pardon me?
Go ahead.
I'm really hard of hearing. Half of this conversation I missed.
Okay. Well, we'll let you do the talking and then you'll hear.
Anyway, I live roll back the years, about 30 years ago, I could throw a ball in there. And I don't really want to live where I have to look at these solar panels all day long. And I came home one day, and there was a gentleman in my yard taking pictures. Go figure. And so I went over and asked him, I said, well, what are you doing? And he, well, I'm here on behalf of Solarcraft, and we're taking pictures to see if this is going to bother you at all. I've lived in this area for over 70 years. I saw it one time when a farmer from Mazzano came in and farmed that whole area. They broke it up. They disturbed the grass. You couldn't see the sun for dust. You can ask my neighbor what happens when it gets away on you. If they go in there and disturb all this good grass, it's going to be a train wreck, I'm telling you right now. With the winds we get and you loosen that dirt up, look out. And if it just appears to me that this decision was already made way back. They tried to get me to communicate with them on a computer. Well, good luck. It's not that I'm stupid, I just don't know how to run one.
That's right.
If I need to fix a tractor or something, I can go in and find out. Yeah.
I get
And they gave me a number this long that I had to, like, me and the wife were lost.
Yeah.
And regardless of where this goes in, the county's still going to get their tax money if that's what's about. And really, everybody says, well, it's for the good of everyone. Well, that guy living over in Tilly doesn't give a damn. The guy in Bazzano doesn't care. The guy in Rainier don't care. I live there, and I care. And if my neighbors, like Clausen's, for example, put up a for sale sign, that don't make me happy.
Thank you.
Because they're damn good neighbors. And so is Ben Commodore and the rest of them that aren't here today. So if they're going to go through with it anyway, I wished I knew who the head of this outfit was. I'd go and camp on his front lawn for a couple of weeks. Bring all my kids, maybe, build a campfire. See how he likes it. These guys are in my face. I'm not in theirs.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mr. Schneider.
The other thing too, this whole deal, when they tried to put it over on Bilderschon's land, they lied to us through the whole thing. It was nothing but a bunch of lies. And I think this is the same way. And if they do it, I want to see a 400-yard buffer zone and trees. Because we can see this right from our kitchen window, right where I sit in the morning and eat my breakfast, and I don't want to look at this. Plain and simple. It's all about money.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Schneider before he... All right, I think we have your points. We made some notes from all of you. We appreciate your comments and we appreciate your time. And believe me, we feel your concerns today. MPC, do you have any questions of staff? Yes, Arnold, go ahead.
I have a couple. I think we've heard a couple of specific at minimum requests. One was for some setbacks, and one was for a buffer of trees planted around the around the area. Is that within our jurisdiction to be able to insist that that happen as a condition of approval?
The zero setback request is for the property lines that are within the project area, not for the boundary. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The actual panels themselves won't be right on the property line. That's not not right on the property line adjacent to the project boundary. So that's one thing to consider, I suppose. Pardon me, I suppose. MPC does have the ability to require landscaping if they'd like to add that as a condition. And then the setbacks, MPC does have the ability to maintain the setbacks that are required in the land use bylaw. There could be reason to increase those with some reasoning, I suppose, in some locations. So that is the ability of MPC, should you wish.
And Maria, just further to that, what is the land use setbacks in our bylaw? And what is Solarcraft proposing here? Are they within our bylaw? Jeff, are you online? Oh, Jeff with Solarcraft is here. Oh, okay. Jeff Fichuk from Solarcraft, I see you're on the line. Would you like to answer that question? Good morning, by the way.
Good morning. Could you please repeat that question?
What are the setbacks you are proposing on this project around the perimeter of the property, of the construction zone?
Thank you. So that the setbacks vary, and as part of our PIP program or participant involvement program, where we engaged with community members and landowners, it depended on the type of property, or it depends on the type of property because of the vastness of our project. But I would like to point out something that it's material and important that the commissioners understand this. When you look at the actual site plan, and for example, in relation to the Classens property, if you look at the site plan, you can see that the system itself is somewhat removed from their property. In fact, in the Utility Commission proceeding, the evidence that was put to the commission is that the actual setback from the Classens was 471 meters. So it's a half a quarter section. It's in excess of a half quarter section. And you can see that in the northwest corner of the project, where we don't approach the canal, nor do we approach those dwellings. So the commission itself, in its decision, excuse me, in paragraph 125, overall, and I'm just going to quickly read this to you. The commission is satisfied that Solarcraft's participant involvement program for the project meets Rule 7 requirements, especially in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. The commission notes that Solarcraft mailed multiple project information packages to stakeholders, conducted consultation meetings with stakeholders via phone and email, and provided project-specific information regarding siting and associated environmental, noise, and solar glare impacts. So, okay, my apologies. So this just goes to how appropriate our consultations were, and the commission found that they were. But in relation to setbacks and visual impacts, if you look at Ms. Lee's summary, paragraph L, the Alberta Utilities Commission is satisfied that Solarcraft's participant involvement program for the project meets their requirements. In addition, the Commission is satisfied that the applicant has mitigated potential visual impacts. And again, we did this on an individual basis. We looked at each stakeholder and we made determinations. You know, what can we do here? Is it viable commercially? Does it make sense to do this? And in that particular corner of the project where the dwellings are sited, we went to significant degree of relaxation in terms of our setback to accommodate our neighbors in that regard. So that's something that we did do. And the idea that we should now have a new condition imposed on the project where we plant shrubs and trees, notwithstanding the fact that the Utility Commission has found that we have adequately mitigated potential visual impacts, we respectfully ask that that not be imposed on this project. You know, this project is non-subsidized. There's no government pork driving this project in any way, shape, or form. And, you know, we need to be competitive commercially. And there's different interests that are competing in relation to this project, but we bend over backward when we can, and we do, to do what we can to satisfy and mitigate potential impacts. And in this particular case, we've gone way beyond by imposing a 450-meter setback in relation to those dwellings.
Thank you for that. We have another question here, and I apologize, I did not pay attention that you were on the line earlier, so thank you for answering that question. Holly, go ahead.
So, Mr. Tkachuk, is the fence then going to be at 470 meters as well, or where is the fence going to be? Because I'll be still looking at that fence.
That is correct. Well, yes, that is correct. So the actual fence itself is set back by 470 meters. The darker red dotted hyphenated line, that's just what we deem to be the project boundary. And we use that delineation to inform our biologists, for example, or whomever, in relation to surveys and studies and so forth. But at the end of the day, once we have all the data, and in this case, when we collected all the data, performed all our different consultations, you know, not just with landowners, but also with different agencies, environment and parks and so forth, we made a determination, and that's what that is. So that fence line is set back over 470 meters from the Classens dwelling at its closest point.
Okay, thank you.
Hi there, good morning. Can I just correct that distance? This is Samantha with Sabre Energy. I just wanted to let you guys know that the fence is 462 meters and the solar arrays are 471 meters.
Thank you.
And if I may, it's Mark Berger, the president of Solarcraft. At the Alberta Utilities Commission hearing, we submitted visual simulations that addressed all of the neighbors, showing exactly what they would see and what they wouldn't see, and plus a myriad of other information that we furnished to the stakeholders and the neighbors, as well as the AUC, that really carefully defined what kind of impacts there would be and that there wouldn't be. So there's no surprise to anyone of what we're discussing here, because these setbacks, as Mr. Tkachuk mentioned, they were very carefully decided after the consultations with stakeholders over the last couple of years. So we listened to everything that our neighbors said, and that we have neighbors here that they can look at the site plan. It was all part of the hearing. They were there. It's very clear that we listened and made sure that at every turn we did the best that we could to really reduce the impact of the solar farm on our neighbors, because we really take that to heart.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Any other questions for Solarcraft now that we know they're here? Yes, go ahead, Greg.
How come we have how can we have people here today that are impacted by this project, indicating that they haven't received communication or proper communication from you? I'm trying to put this together, and I see there's 471 meters from their property lines. Do the people here today know that's the amount of space that was going to be there, or?
Excellent question. And that's an excellent question, sir. You know, the reality of it is that the Classens, Mr. Commodore, they were all part of a group called the Castle Group, and they were represented by Ackroyd LLP in the Utility Commission proceeding hearing. The total cost of that representation to Solarcraft, which we paid, was $137,000. They were appropriately, competently, and fully represented in this Utility Commission proceeding approving this project. To suggest that they had no notice or they were misinformed, it was an extensive hearing. It lasted 4 days. There was lead up to this hearing where there was evidence exchanged between parties, information requests exchanged between parties. In Ackroyd in particular is a well-respected and popular law firm that represents communities opposed to utility projects. So, you know, notwithstanding in a positive litigious environment, you know, they were not underrepresented in any way, shape, or form. It's the furthest thing from the truth, quite frankly. And
okay, so I think that's a matter of opinion at this point then, right?
If I may add then, this is Mark here again. I spoke, you know, way back when we started reaching out to our neighbors and to all of the stakeholders personally with the Classens, and also personally with Mr. Commodore. In fact, they all had my direct line, and Mr. Commodore called me a couple of times, and we spoke in total over 2 hours, you know, a year and a half ago, and all the way through this process. There was a direct line, and you can see he's quoting some of the, or misquoting some of the, you know, conversation. Again, over 2 hours of direct personal conversation, you know, with Mr. Commodore, and you know, the issues that he's bringing up about the parallel between you know, a solar farm which uses sunshine as our resource, and comparing it to a non-renewable resource such as oil and gas, where the resource is depleted, and then the infrastructure no longer has any value. You know, so we discussed at some length that with a renewable energy resource where the sunshine is you know, hopefully not going to be depleted anytime in the planning horizon, that in fact these solar farms you know, are sustainable and they do have a very long life. And I'll just quickly you know, add and point out that he is also aware, and I think it's pretty clear that the Alberta Utilities Commission directed in their AUC Bulletin 2020-13 and 2020-30 that in-person consultations should be replaced by phone or email or virtual. That's a direct direction that we are to follow from the Alberta Utilities Commission, because you know, I think county you know, staff is aware that Solarcraft, we were the, you know, the first in Alberta to start you know, developing non-subsidized solar farms, you know, almost 7 years ago now. And yes, with you know, our other projects before the pandemic, we absolutely made sure that we you know, attended you know, in the community. That's always our preference. When a mandate comes down, you know, from the Alberta Utilities Commission, that there's a directive that we are to follow. You know, had we not followed that, rest assured that there would have been a lot more fallout if we had effectively broken the law in how we did our consultation. So it's not optimum, you know, and the Utilities Commission emphatically stated that we met the conditions. And yeah, it was a difficult time on a number of fronts. But anyways, we're here to continue to answer any
Thank
questions.
you. Yeah, thank you, Mark. Okay, you need to come to the microphone if you want to speak. You have a question of Solarcraft?
I have more of a statement to make, or at least this is kind of what I'm noticing sitting here from the council. Every single question that you guys asked wasn't answered exactly. Your question was not answered with respect to the exact setbacks surrounding the perimeter. It was just specific to the Clausens was the answer.
The answer I heard is that it's different. It's a large
Correct.
project, so it's not a blanket answer, so that's the answer I heard.
Okay, so the other thing I would just want to point out sitting here that I'm taking in, everything comes down to the bare minimum. We've done the bare minimum. We've not gone above and beyond. So again, I go back in your question, Mr. Screever, was with respect to have they met with us or communication. Mr. Bergert's answer was we did the bare minimum. AUC said we could do it virtually, so we did the bare minimum.
Okay.
And from a
draw this out longer than it needs to be, but I'd like to hear from Solarcraft what their adjustments have been to the response of the community in terms of, you know, have they made additional allowances to respond to what they've heard from the community? I guess we've heard some of that, but
It looks like Mark is ready to respond to that. Go ahead, Mark.
Sure. I mean, the list is really too long to cite here. From our first engagement with not only our neighbors, but all of our stakeholders, you know, Torxton and the other oil and gas operators, AEP, which Mr. Commodore has expressed that, and he's right, that he spent more time talking to Alberta Energy and Parks about this project, arguably than anyone. He was all over them from the very beginning. And so you can see the central, kind of that yellow hashed out area. There was a Ferunganus hawk that was identified, a nest that was identified in the center there. So the original project wanted to use as much of that area because even though absolutely it's an additional engineering hurdle for us to work around oil and gas infrastructure when it saturates the area like this. But you know, it really is best practice for integrated land use to use land like this that's been significantly impacted. And that's one of the reasons why the EID was very happy you know, to be our landlord for this project, because you know, the legacy and the amount of infrastructure that's there from other energy uses is very, very substantial. So, you know, just one example, the Ferunganus hawk, you can see a 1 kilometer setback that we you know, initiated around that. An entire section of land to the southwest that was native prairie that Mr. Commodore and others had, you know, spent a lot of time talking about how he wants to maintain his hunting and allowing American hunters to come up and you know, provide, I guess, an economic resource by hunting on that land. So that was actually removed entirely from the project footprint. The buffers all the way around, as Mr. Thatcher touched on. Originally, you can see where the project was, the red hash that went all the way around. And originally we proposed arrays much closer to that in all the areas that were suitable along the northern part of the property. And you know, we literally looked individually at the visual simulations from different neighbors, all of the different neighbors that were potentially impacted. And because of the berm that is around the canal on the northern and western part of the property, it's a very, very significant visual break. And that's what came out, is that you really can't see over top of a lot of that. But even there, you can see that there are some additional setbacks. I mean, if you look at the AUC proceedings, you can see that the many dozens, you know, of concerns that were expressed by stakeholders, way beyond everything that you've heard from the couple that the few that came here today, plus many, many more were addressed and were incorporated into the solar farm from the very beginning all the way through.
Okay, thank you for that. So I think the short answer, Mark, that you're trying to give is that you have done your consultation and that there will be no further consultation? Yes or no?
No, we're happy to continue to talk to landowners, neighbors, and we continue to consult all the way through the construction of the project, even in the operation. So no, we're absolutely, here to hear anything that stakeholders have to say. But it is important to understand that the level of vetting and level of participation from the Alberta Utilities Commission was incredibly rigorous. And so building something like this, like Mr. Thatchuk mentioned, a non-subsidized solar farm, this isn't about government pork. This is about, competing, to bring the lowest levelized cost of energy into the marketplace possible. So that it's not like there's some kind of, gravy train there. And you can see there are trade-offs for everything that happen. And any cost that's incurred by the project, it's difficult, right? And at the end of the day, those trade-offs were carefully delineated, and that's where if you really look at the entire process, that the rigorousness of the Alberta Utilities Commission, that's what that's about. And it's not as though you can just then arbitrarily pile additional stuff on top of that. The project doesn't have the kind of economic room to accommodate that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. MPC, yes, go ahead.
So I do want to just anchor council back to our responsibilities under the MGA. The AUC process is very rigorous. There's a 46-page decision that the AUC issued on this. A lot of what we've heard today are those same issues again. So consultation was addressed by the AUC, setbacks by the AUC, visual impacts by the AUC. There's actually conditions the AUC has put on Solarcraft for further surveys and reports coming back to them. So those are conditions of that approval. And I'm just going to read word for word out of the MGA 619 sub 2 what council acting as MPC responsibility is. So when an application is received by a municipality for approval granted by the AUC, the municipality must approve the application to the extent that it complies with the license, permit, approval, or other authorization granted under subsection 1. So we have had a few requests for additional conditions. You could entertain that. You could try to request that or put a condition of approval that screening the windbreak be put up. You're likely going to see an appeal to the LPRT filed by Solarcraft. I mean, that might be a good question to put to Solarcraft now, is are they amenable to putting up the screening, putting up some trees? They've heard from the community that that would be valued. But I anticipate if they're not open to that and you put that down as a condition of approval, we'll find ourselves at the LPRT and it will likely be overturned.
So we will put that question to you. Go ahead, Mark.
You're correct that we are opposed to it, and the reason is pretty simple. This was carefully addressed through the AUC proceeding, and even before that, where screening is something that we have used on projects. The alternative to screening is relaxed, wider setbacks. They both can have the same effect, and so they both come at significant cost. And after consulting with our neighbors, and you can maybe have them come up and talk to us, would they rather have a project up to the property line, or would they, or at least as close to the property line as we're allowed to build, or would they want some larger relaxations? And that was exactly what was determined and what we worked through in consultation with our neighbors. And the determination was clear. If you can give us a little bit more room, you heard, give us more than 30 meters, And that's what we did very, very significantly and very, very strategically to make sure that anywhere where, you know, it was tens of thousands of dollars of visual simulations that were submitted to the Alberta Utilities Commission and to our neighbors so they could see, and these are very accurate, where there were potential visual impacts. And that's where we had the widest setbacks introduced, which again come at a very significant cost. And so that was the route that we took. So it's, and this is exactly what I mean, it's not okay to have something like this really carefully addressed, very, very heavily mitigated by way of additional setbacks, and then, you know, have, Mr. Commodore, you know, show up at the end and say, oh, and we want, you know, it doesn't work that way. It was, the commission understood, everyone understood, the neighbors understood that, you know, it's either or, either we build it up as close as we can and then screen that, or, you know, we look at it very strategically and build in additional setbacks to mitigate any visual impact to the really the bare minimum. And that's what we did here. And you can see that, you know, when you're talking about 400 plus meters, you know, that's outside of anything that's normally entertained. So we in all sincerity bent over backwards to make sure that we listened to our neighbors and we built that in. And that's why the idea of then slapping screening on top, you know, to double up the cost, it's just an attempt to try to make the project economically non-viable.
Okay, thank you. So MPC, we do have a recommendation. It has A through N conditions. How do you wish to handle this application? Keeping in mind that we can add a condition that would go to the AUC to be reviewed, or we go with the conditions that are in place as recommended by AUC and the landowner, EID. Also put condition M on. Ellen.
I'm quite concerned about the 450 vehicles a day during the process when it's being built. Will the neighbors get a dust abatement? Because you have to remember that the 450, that's 900 times by your place on a gravel road. That is going to cause a lot of dust.
Go ahead.
So again, this was considered by the AUC. We're really diving into work and reworking what the AUC has already looked at. One of the conditions is for Solarcraft to work with the county on a road use agreement and appropriate dust abatement if that's necessary. My understanding after reading the AUC decision is most of the traffic is going to be accessing the construction site off of Highway 36.
Thanks, Matt. Neil.
Yeah, just a comment to the landowners. I live on a solar farm. The one right over there, my house is 30-meter setback. These setbacks that these guys are proposing are fantastic compared to that one. And my wife's got a beautiful garden. We look at the solar panels every day. They kind of look cool in the evening when they switch. I just have to relay that.
Thanks, Neil. MPC, how do you wish to handle this application? Holly.
I'm just confused. So any extra condition goes to the AUC?
Yes.
It will not necessarily be appealed to the LPRT, but there's a high likelihood if you add a condition for screening, which Mark from Solarcraft said they're opposed to, you're likely going to see that appealed by Solarcraft, and that's appealed to the Land and Property Rights Tribunal. The legislation is clear. MPC must approve the permit or the approval so long as it's aligned with the AUC decision. So you don't have a lot of room to color outside of the lines without consequence.
Holly?
So we need to have something in place already saying that any solar development requires trees. If that was in our specific bylaws, then they'd have to go with that. But because we don't.
Maria, go ahead, answer Holly's question.
The county has the ability to register as an intervener at the time that the AUC receives an application, much like the adjacent landowners did. It has been the direction in the past that we allow the AUC to go through the process and then the development permit is applied for. If council, I suppose, would have to make that decision, would like to create some more regulation as far as what they would like solar to do or separate setbacks, that would have to be reviewed then and the land use bylaw amended. And then the direction could be that staff register as an intervener and we make comment during the AUC hearings and during their approval process. Unfortunately, that's not something we can do now for this, but that is something we could do going forward if that's the council wishes.
I'm looking for a motion, MPC. Yep. We have, go ahead.
Not really sure how to word the motion.
It's written in your package. You don't have to create it.
No, but I was thinking of maybe some more trees or...
So what we learned is that would come up in the development process. Once the application goes through MPC, then it goes to council, and that's where we would put in any aesthetics.
Okay, I will make that motion then.
Maria?
Sorry, Madam Chair, this is the decision for this solar craft project. So if MPC would like to add any conditions, then this would be the time to add them to the approval.
Okay, I stand corrected.
Yeah, it only going forward should council want to add more.
To the land use bylaw.
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah.
So you want to add a condition to this recommendation? Is that what I'm hearing?
I want to
now?
see, I think maybe a few more trees would be a good idea if we can put it in. If we can't, maybe Solarcraft could get together with the community and discuss that.
And it sounded like Mark was amenable to that, but again, do you want to make that a condition of your motion? Maria?
I don't want to open a can of worms here, but could MPC say if the setback to the actual solar panel development is less than X, then screening would be provided? If it's greater than X, something like that?
This is a perfect example of why we outsource these kind of decisions to the AUC. So it used to be, there was a time where the county entertained a development permit before the AUC process took place. And it's just a big dog's breakfast of trying to sort out the right thing. The AUC has their panel, they've got the experience, they've been through it all. So at this point, really MPC does rubber stamp that. Unless you want to take the risk of adding conditions and going to the LPRT and defending that. So if you add a condition, I fully expect administration will be going to the Land and Property Rights Tribunal with Solarcraft, making our argument that trees should be there, even though Solarcraft has moved their setbacks way back. When I hear Mark speak, it's an either or, because both have costs. The trees cost, and we'll pay for the trees if we can be closer and have a bigger footprint. We'll put the setback further in, if we don't have to pay for the trees. So at this point, and that's why it's kind of structured this way, AUC has done the heavy lifting. It comes here so long as what Solarcraft has put on their development permit doesn't deviate from what was approved by the AUC. MPC is fine to approve it as is. If there were variances in that, our staff would catch it, flag it, and you'd have a decision to make. But so long as it's in place and in line with the AUC, it's a rubber stamp at this point.
Okay, Holly has a question.
Can we adjourn this and ask Solarcraft and with the community and try to resolve some of these issues? Can we just push it back and say they need to do their work first?
Matt?
The AUC in their decision indicated that Solarcraft's community engagement met the requirements. So I think it's a dead issue on the consultation.
So, Neil, you were close to making the motion. You got your answer to a condition being added. Are you willing to make the motion now?
Yes, I'm going to make the motion. I don't want to complicate it any more than it already is.
Yeah.
It should have come up at AUC.
We have discussed, we have learned. Are there any further comments or questions from MPC? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. The motion is in your package, as are all the conditions. All in favor of Neil's motion? I need a vote, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is carried. And that is a wrap on that conversation. I would like to close, if I may, by encouraging residents to reach out, or Solarcraft to reach out to the ratepayers that have concerns. I encourage you to work with and together. Development is a priority in the County of Newell. We are open for business, and thanks Solarcraft for being in the community. We need to work with our neighbors. Yeah, we all do. You're right. Thank you. Let's carry on to our agenda, please. Item 8.2. Shanna Lee, thank you.
Development permit 2022064 is to install a shipping container as an accessory to the fire hall in the hamlet of Rolling Hills. The shipping container will be used for practice purposes for the firefighters. There was no issues or concerns from staff. The Rolling Hills Hamlet Advisory Committee did respond with no issues or concerns. There was no responses from adjacent landowners, and we are recommending approval with conditions.
Any questions or comments? When this came out, I did have some questions and I got my answers. How would you like to handle this, MPC? Go ahead.
I'd make the motion to approve this.
Motion to approve. Anything further? I'll call the question. All in favor of Lynette's motion? That is carried. Thank you. Any post-agenda items? None that we established. Any in camera? MPC? Seeing none. Question period. Todd, are there any questions that are posted online?
Hi there. I had no questions come from the live stream. Samantha Brown did just post a thank you on the live side, saying thank you for your time and for having us this morning, and to enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, thank you, Todd. I'm going to adjourn this meeting.
This meeting is adjourned. I'm going to suggest that we reconvene our regular council meeting in 5 minutes, so just before 25 to 12. Gives everybody an opportunity for a quick break. We're obviously a little behind schedule, but that is as it is today. So.